This is the Rick Edelman Show. Now, here's Rick Edelman.
Welcome back to the program. Hope you're enjoying the holiday season. I'm Rick Edelman on The Truth About Money, and I know one of the favorite pastimes during the holidays is to watch all those fabulous old movies about Christmas. I love watching them, too. And one of my favorites, I know it's one of yours as well, is It's a Wonderful Life, starring the fabulous George Bailey. I know it's really Jimmy Stewart, but work with me, people. George Bailey, the wonderful icon.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town.
The film's signature sign-off. But I got to tell you, the more I watch this movie, the more it drives me crazy. I don't mean to be a Scrooge, and I don't want to put a damper on the fact that George Bailey is a fabulous role model, selfless, concerned about the community, puts everybody's needs ahead of his own. He's a wonderful role model for our children, but only to a point. You see, George Bailey, he's rich in heart only. Financially, the guy's a complete failure. And you know what? It doesn't have to be either or. You don't have to choose between being financially successful and successful in community and family. It doesn't have to be either or. We're allowed to be both. Too many Americans believe that being rich is bad. And the media consistently perpetuates this myth. They did it back in the 30s with Scrooge. They did it with George Bailey versus Mr. Potter. They did it more recently with Gordon Gekko and Wall Street. And it's just on everywhere you turn. Rich people are portrayed as bad. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, George Bailey could have stayed everything he was. He could have maintained his integrity and his morals 100% intact, while also doing a better job in personal finance for himself and his wife and his children. He could have invested in his friend's startup company. His friend offered him the ground floor opportunity, gave him the chance to buy stock when it was a brand new startup, and George deliberately, specifically said no. He wants no part of it. He could have bought more life insurance protection for his family. He had a stay-at-home wife raising 3 children, or was it 4? Insufficient amount of life insurance to protect himself and his family. On the day of the stock market crash, his wedding day, when there was a run on the Bailey building and loan as well as on the bank down the street, which was, by the way, a terrific lesson in what happened on the crash of '29 and the financial run that occurred in the banking system in America. It was wonderful of him to come to the rescue of the building and loan and all of its depositors, using his personal savings that he was going to spend on his honeymoon to instead keep people financially solvent during the depths of the crisis. That was wonderful for him to do that. But you know what? Instead of giving them the money, he could have lent it to them at a fair interest rate. He could have even charged a below-market interest rate to be community-oriented, but he didn't have to self-sacrifice to such a degree that he personally fell on his sword. Even one of the bank depositors said, "George, that's your own money." And he waved her off as saying, "Don't worry about that." Well, I hope his children got a sense of that, to understand why their education opportunities were limited. And you know what? He could have taken the job offer that Mr. Potter offered him. How much was it? $20,000 a contract for a 3-year deal? George was aghast. He thought that taking that contract would be selling out. Do you realize that when this movie was filmed in the 1930s, $20,000 a year in income would have made him one of the wealthiest people in the country? What good could he have done with all of that money? He could have supported the community in ways he never envisioned. He also would have taken control of Potter's businesses. And as an insider, he would have been able to improve the sales practices and the employment practices of all of those companies, affecting virtually every business in town, all of those workers, and all of their customers. Do you suppose that he would have made changes for the better in monumental ways? And he likely would have become the heir to Potter's wealth, that sick old man in a wheelchair. And he would ultimately have had complete control over all of Potter's wealth. I remember once when I was on Oprah, and there was a question by a member of the audience. You know, Oprah always used to do the after show. After we would film the hour-long program, we'd hang around with the audience for another hour or two, taking just questions from the audience. And Oprah would sometimes air those as an additional television show. And one woman expressed the question to me in the audience that she felt guilty saving money. And I said to her, "You're missing the point. You're confusing wealth with materialism." And she had an aha moment, realizing that it's not evil to have money. It's evil to love money. There's a huge difference. And the point I made at the after show at Oprah was, look at Oprah herself. One of the most generous benefactors in the nation, one of the most beloved figures in American society. Do you suppose Oprah was of greater good to America before she became a billionaire or since she's become a billionaire? George Bailey could have done the very same thing, and he turned Potter down completely unnecessarily. Pride in his poverty is the position that George Bailey took. And as a result, we know how the story ended. George Bailey found himself in such dire financial straits, owing more money than he could afford to repay because of his uncle's error, that he resulted in a cowardly suicide attempt. Had he succeeded in that attempt, where would that have left his wife and his children? Where would that have left the Bailey Building and Loan and all of the depositors dependent on that institution? George Bailey could have become the most powerful man in town, truly affecting the lives of everyone in genuinely fundamental ways. And instead, he was merely accoladed as being a really nice guy. My point, as you watch the film this year with your kids, show them how you can not only be a nice guy, but you can be a rich, nice guy, too. Remember, money doesn't change people. It just expands them. It just exaggerates them. If you're a jerk, money is going to make you a bigger jerk. And if you're a nice guy, money's going to make you even nicer. I assure you, Mr. Potter was not a nice guy in his youth and his poverty. Having money didn't change him. And it wasn't going to change George Bailey either. And you know what? It's not going to change you either. It's okay to amass wealth. Give yourself permission to create wealth. Give yourself the gift of a financial future free of financial strife and stress. George Bailey would be proud of you. I'm Rick Edelman. This is The Rick Edelman Show. When we come back, your telephone calls, 888-PLAN-RICK, RiceStelman.com. Stay with us for more on The Rick Edelman Show.